Is God really a magical sky wizard or whatever this guy wants to claim? Well, yes, of course he is. At least the imaginary character described in his big book of mythology is, but they really want to think it's real because that makes them happy. And guess what? Your feelings don't mean a damn thing. So this is going to be an interesting one. Let's go do this. So today we're going to go take a look at a channel called Testify, where our artistic host is going to complain about atheists calling his imaginary friend names. Now, this is not at all uncommon because the religious tend to get butthurt when people point out the actual truth of their beliefs, so they whine long and hard about just how unfair it all is that we're actually right about the things they believe, because they just don't like that. So let's go and see how all of this plays out.
Have you ever heard atheists refer to God as the magical sky wizard? Who am I kidding? Of course you have. It's an internet atheist staple.
Well, I never have. Magical sky daddy, yes, but never wizard. Granted, I'm sure there are variations on the theme, and it really doesn't matter what terminology you use, because it all gets back to the same basic idea. God is an imaginary friend. There is absolutely no independently, objectively corroborable evidence that supports the existence of any God of any kind in any time or any place at all, period. You might want there to be one, but that doesn't mean anything at all. So let's just move on.
But since it's so common, let's try and steelman their ridicule and understand what they're trying to say. Premise 1, explanations without mechanisms are appeals to magic. Premise 2, theistic explanations lack a mechanism. Conclusion, theistic explanations are appeals to magic. Or, as Richard Dawkins put it, why is God considered an explanation for anything? It's not. It's a failure to explain, a shrug of the shoulders, and I don't know, dressed up in spirituality and ritual. If someone credits something to God, generally it means is they don't have a clue, so they're attributing it to some unreachable, unknowable sky fairy.
And that's essentially what's going on now. Now, I know that this guy is going to get to a point where he'll just have to say, effectively, nah. Keep in mind that I don't think this is an automatic appeal to magic, whatever that is, although it might be very accurate. It's all just a giant appeal to emotion. The idea of a father figure in the sky that watches down over us and wants to solve all of our problems, that's very emotionally comforting for a lot of people. How does any of this happen? Well, magic mostly, because, as he admits, they have no rational justification for any of it. It's just a baldly asserted claim with nothing at all to back it up. Nothing at all. It's all wishful thinking wrapped up in an invisibility cloak. So Dawkins was absolutely right, and this guy is going to wind up being completely wrong. As if that's any surprise.
The problem with this argument is that personal choice is arguably a mechanism of sorts, and it's one that we experience every single day.
But your personal choice has no bearing whatsoever on reality. You can't personally choose to disbelieve in gravity as you just plummet off a tall building. You're going to go splat no matter what you believe. Your choices are not relevant. Your beliefs are not relevant. Only reality is. Maybe you should get that through your head.
If I hear a knock at the door and see there's a pizza delivery guy on my porch, I can deduce that my wife chose to order out rather than cook that night. That's a personal explanation, and no appeal to magic is necessary.
Or it could be a delivery to the wrong house. Or it could be a murderous thug using the pizza delivery as a vehicle to get access to his target. Or it could be a scam. Provide your credit card and we'll charge it up to the hilt. There are a lot of possibilities. The one that isn't a credible possibility in this case is that your magical sky daddy thought you looked hungry and therefore he ordered a pizza for you. Because that's just dumb. Besides, it doesn't matter what rationalization you invent in your head. There is only one real explanation, and that's the explanation that actually took place in the real world. Whether you know what that explanation is or not is irrelevant. You can't just invent something out of whole cloth because it makes you feel good.
Or if a personal God exists, he can choose to create a universe if he wants to, or he can decide to raise Jesus of Nazareth from the dead if he wants to prove his claims to be the Messiah. Gregory Dawes, an atheist philosopher, agrees that it's inadequate to say that theists are appealing to magic just because divine action fails to give us some kind of predictive power. He writes, "Our everyday intentional explanations also fail to make quantitative predictions. Worse still, they are notoriously vague terms such as belief, desire, hope, and fear. We use such terms to explain and to predict people's behavior even when we lack any clear idea of what mental states they denote. They can still be useful, they have explanatory force, and can still enable us to make some rough and ready predictions. And unless you are prepared to reject all forms of intentional explanation, the fact that a proposed theistic explanation lacks precision does not seem to be a fatal objection."
But that's not what anyone is objecting to. We're objecting to the fact that you're just yanking these ideas straight out of your ass, and even though they lack any kind of actual explanatory power, you're still doing it. They cannot be corroborated as reasonable or rational via any demonstrable means whatsoever. It's like claiming that the fact that your tooth is gone from underneath your pillow is proof of the tooth fairy. Well, that might be a comforting or terrifying, depending on how you look at it, proposition, but that doesn't make it true. We're just asking how they get from the claim, which is really all they have, to the fact, which they absolutely cannot demonstrate. They can't even produce anything that objectively shows their claims to be likely. They have nothing. Nothing at all. And that's kind of a problem if you think about it.
Also, using the word magic really isn't all that helpful. The word magic is a slippery word that really isn't easily defined.
Neither is faith or belief or any of the other words that the religious use on a regular basis to describe what they do. Now, I'll be honest, I thought he'd be upset that the things we were saying were making him feel bad, because I've seen plenty of Christians get upset that we compare their imaginary friend to Santa Claus or Bigfoot because, wah, that makes us sad. But this seems really silly to be quibbling over a word that's actually accurate in this context. What do you think God did? What do you think miracles are? Because if we go to the dictionary for the definition of magic, we get the power of apparently influencing the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. How is that any different than what the religious claim their deities have done? That's exactly what God is. I'm not sure where this guy is going with any of this, to be honest. What's going on?
In the book Magic, a Very Short Introduction, Owen Davies writes, "Defining magic is a maddening task. Of the last century, numerous philosophers, anthropologists, historians, and theologians have attempted to pin down its essential meaning, sometimes analyzing it in such complex and abstruse depth that it but all loses its sense altogether. For this reason, many of those researching the practice of magic in the past and present often shy away from providing a detailed definition."
So he's restricting this to stage magic. Well, that's pretty absurdly limiting, isn't it? After all, what Harry Potter and the students of Hogwarts supposedly did, that wasn't a trick or anything. That was actual magic power using some kind of undefined supernatural abilities. This becomes the argument from dictionary fallacy, where someone points to the dictionary or some other supposedly authoritative book and claims they've got it right based on what it says. Except dictionaries are prescriptive, not descriptive. They describe how the words are used in practice, not what they actually mean. So when atheists supposedly use this term, and again, I've never seen it, but I'll take his word for it, it is likely they are using it as I described, not as he's trying to explain it. I'm still not exactly sure what he's trying to get at. I figure it's going to come down to feeling somewhere, but let's let him continue.
Given its vague usage, it's not very useful in the use of an argument. Plus, magic is often seen as something that's part of nature. It's law-governed in some way. Magicians have to learn to make their chants in specific ways, and often at particular times like during a full moon. Magic potions need to have certain weird ingredients like the eye of a newt or the toe of a frog, and evil rings can only be destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom.
Whoa, hold up, wait a minute. You think any of this is real? Because newsflash for you, Skippy, it's all just made up. Now, granted, there are people who actually believe this nonsense, and that's every bit as sad as adults that have imaginary friends. But there's a big difference between waving a stick of wood around and muttering incoherently to yourself and someone up on stage doing illusions. This guy seems to be all over the place. What's up with that?
It's all assumed to be a part of nature, even if it's a weird or hidden part of nature.
No. In the case of illusionists, it's all sleight of hand and misdirection. In the case of witches and cauldrons, it's just a myth. In neither case is it part of nature. Magic doesn't actually exist. It's a figment of your imagination. Just like your God. But see, this is when we get back to asking the hard questions, and the religious aren't going to have any decent answers. Because I don't care what you claim, I care what you can prove, and we all know you can't prove a damn thing when it comes to proving your gods exist or actually do anything, and that's kind of a problem. I don't give a damn what kind of emotionally comforting crap you need to get through the day. That's for children, not rational, mature adults. Try being the latter for once. It helps.
Plus, if God exists, he isn't constrained in the same way. If he wants to create a universe or raise the dead, he does it. And if there was such a thing as magic in the world, God would be the one who would be sustaining it, and he could rewrite all the magical laws if he really wanted to.
That's a lot of ifs, right? Now, prove that any of it is actually so. That's where the religious run into trouble because they can't do any of that. Their entire belief system is based on if. Well, actually, they take a lot of ifs and string them all together in an emotionally comforting way, and then they just substitute because for if, and think they've actually done something useful, when in reality, they haven't. And this is where we run into so many problems because the religious aren't even aware of what they're doing. They have become so deluded by their beliefs that they can't imagine what the real world might look like if they were wrong. They have repeatedly rejected reality and substituted their own, to paraphrase Adam Savage. So now what? What does this get them? They don't care. They have become so emotionally invested in holding these asinine beliefs that actual reality just doesn't matter anymore. It's too scary a prospect. They need that emotional teddy bear to cling to, or they just can't handle getting out of bed anymore. That's not a reality problem, that's a theism problem. Maybe they just need to grow the hell up.
The Bible does make reference to magicians, but it portrays God's power as more powerful. Moses turned his staff into a snake, but so did the magicians in Pharaoh's court. But then Moses' staff proceeded to eat the other staffs, or snakes. It's a rather strange story. But the point is, the magician's power is derived from the creation and is limited, but God's power is portrayed as unlimited.
The whole story is a myth, but the religious are so deluded that they can't tell the difference between a story and the truth. These people need serious psychological help. Harry Potter and Voldemort both used magic, but Harry won out through the power of love and friendship. These people are reading a book of fiction and thinking, mistakenly, that any of it actually happened. And I don't care what you have faith in. I care if what you have faith in is actually reasonable or rational to accept, and nothing in the Bible actually is. Nothing supernatural anyhow. This is just a bunch of little children buying into everything it says in one of their storybooks, only these people have some political and social power, and they're demanding that other people take the crazy things in their heads seriously. Yeah, no, you're all nuts. Prove me wrong.
When skeptics use the word magic to refer to divine action, I assume they're usually more interested in insulting me than actually having a real conversation. It shows that they probably haven't read up on the philosophical tradition that theism actually has to offer.
Except we have. Well, I have, and it's not remotely impressive. Because, as I said before, the religious start with an emotionally comforting conclusion built on a house of cards based on feelings, not objective facts, and then they cherry-pick data and arguments based on getting to that preconceived notion that they require because their entire self-image is based upon it. Well, that's their problem. What they assume in their heads to be true, and all of the bald rationalizations that go along with it, none of it stands up to any critical scrutiny whatsoever. I've got hundreds of videos on this channel alone that prove that conclusively. Yet they don't seem to care about any of that, do they? Because this is about their feelings. It's never about the facts.
Offer. Maybe they do mean that theistic explanations lack a mechanism, but we've shown that personal choice is arguably a mechanism, and it's the one that we're most intimately familiar with.
Except it has nothing at all to do with mechanisms. Just because you can make something up in your head and believe it, that doesn't mean that what you believe is worth believing. That's really where this becomes more than just your emotional state. It's not all about you. That's how children act. It's why they throw temper tantrums when they don't get their own way. It's really why this video is being made, because it's all about the theist feelings and not at all about the objective facts. It's, "Wah, stop making me feel bad." Well, that's your problem, not ours. You're the one believing stupid crap. Knock it off. Respect isn't just granted, it's earned. Maybe, just hear me out here, but maybe you ought to try earning some.
If the skeptic means that the ideas of miracles is just weird, well, then I think they need to realize that miracles have to be a little weird, because if they weren't strange, they would never stand out to us otherwise. It would be very hard to identify a miracle as some kind of sign if it wasn't out of the ordinary.
Sign of what? Because, again, that's just an assumption made up by people who really want to feel special. And they're not. They're just not. Because there are no miracles, at least not the supernatural kind. If you think there are, present one. Be prepared to present evidence that shows that it actually has supernatural origins. Good luck on that. Because at the end of the day, claims of miracles are just that. Claims. Anyone can make a claim. They just have a very hard time backing any of it up.
So, appealing to God as the cause of something isn't an appeal to magic. Telling theists that they believe in some magical sky daddy isn't really very original or clever.
It's just absolutely accurate. That's what we're really after here, after all. Accuracy. There are no demonstrable differences between the God of the Bible and Gandalf except scale. Granted, Gandalf didn't really do a lot of actual magic in the novels, but that's not really the point. God is just a powerful wizard writ large, whether the religious like it or not. This isn't about your feelings, no matter how much you're convinced that it is. We are accurately describing what's going on in your silly book of multiple choice. You don't have to be happy about it, and I really don't give a damn if you are, because truth doesn't depend on your feelings. It never has, and it never will. Truth depends on it being demonstrably so, and nothing supernatural in Christianity or any other religion actually is. If you disagree, be prepared to prove it, not only with silly philosophical syllogisms, but with actual demonstrable evidence that anyone can freely examine without having to believe anything about it first. And the religious, they can't do that. It's why the moment we disallow blind faith, they just run away. What else can they do? Because they can't make intelligent points without the presumption that their deity is really there to begin with. They have to assume victory before they can even begin to fight. And that's not how rational people operate, and that's why the religious just aren't rational. They're quibbling over words, absolutely accurate words, because their precious little fifis got injured. Well, grow the hell up. It's really not that hard. Well, it is for the children living in adult bodies. Maybe they should try maturing. It would certainly do everyone a lot of good, especially the irrational God-botherers. The world would be a whole lot better off without you. Join reality for once. It can only help.